If you've opened up the Claude app recently and noticed there's 3 tabs on the top, Chat, Cowork, and Code, but you're not sure which one to use when, you're not alone. This video will clearly explain the different tabs, what the differences are, and when you should use each one, plus walk you through some hidden Claude capabilities that you might not be aware of so you can get the most out of your Claude subscription. The first tab is Chat. This is the one you're probably most familiar with, and how Claude started out. There are additional capabilities that Claude has added in, such as skills, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, which make Claude really powerful. It also has web search ability built in. And for some questions like this, where it's kind of vague how we plan out a YouTube video on the Claude app, it's going to ask some clarifying questions. So there are additional features that have come in. It's not just plain text anymore. But the chat app is what you're probably most familiar with, so I'm going to spend more time on Cowork and Claude. Cowork is where things get really interesting. So this is kind of a combination between chat and Claude Code. Claude Code is very agentic. It can create agents to complete tasks for you. It can work for a really long time in the background. It can access additional tools. It's basically more powerful and able to work for a longer time than chat. Chat is just for simple back and forth. Cowork is when you want to actually get work done. And then it also has access to your computer. So you can work inside a folder on your local computer. And when you give it access to a folder on your computer, it can create files, it can edit files, it can read those files. That's a really powerful aspect of Cowork that chat doesn't have. So for example, just some fun tasks. If you gave it access to your desktop, for example, it could organize all your screenshots and rename them. I have a planning folder with information about no-code MBA, for example, some of my goals, and I'll use that sometimes in Cowork so that it has more context about my business and then it can create documents for me. One thing to be aware of is it is fully local on your machine. You can also upload files or photos and then connect to some APIs as well as add plugins. There are not as many connectors as something like OpenClaw, for example, where you can connect to anything. I think that in the future, Cowork is going to move in that direction. So Cowork is kind of like Claude's version of OpenClaw. OpenClaw is, an always-on personal assistant that can connect to any tool. Cowork, it's a little different in that you have to send a message to it first. It's not going to work in the background and kind of wake up on an hourly basis or on a schedule to do work. It's going to only work when you ask it to do something. And it doesn't have access to as many tools as something like OpenClaw does. And then within Cowork in the settings, you can also edit the custom instructions so that Cowork has specific instructions that are different from when you're using the chat app. I'm going to get into Claude Code in a second, but I want to talk about capabilities. This is something you need to know about the Claude app if you're not using it, specifically the skills. So skills are repeatable, customizable instructions that Claude can follow in any chat. These can be used in chat, in Cowork, and I believe in Claude Code as well. So one example of a skill that I've created. So you can create your own skills with Claude by just chatting back and forth. You can also upload skills or write skills directly in, but you can upload skills from GitHub. There's a lot of people who are sharing skills everywhere right now. They're really popular, especially with the rise of OpenClaw, because OpenClaw can use skills as well. But let me show you one that I created. So this is one that I've created to help me with my YouTube planning. So it basically helps me create titles and hooks, introductions and things like that for my YouTube videos. And I'll show you exactly how it works. So here on the chat where we were working before, when I said, help me plan out a YouTube video on the Claude app, it automatically checked the YouTube hook skill for best practices. I didn't have to say, check the hook. I didn't have to add it in the UI or anything like that. So I just click the refresh button and we can see here, it's reading the YouTube hook skill for best practices. And Claude is going to automatically decide which skills are relevant and which ones they should include. And it's going to do the exact same thing in Cowork. If you are asking something about a specific topic and it's relevant, you can do that. You can mention it in the chat to be sure to use the skill, but it's very good at knowing the context of what you're asking about and using the relevant skill. What makes this different from projects, for example, in chat is that in projects, you can only add context about what the project is, but with skills, you can have 5 skills at once that are all being incorporated into your chat. So it's composable and can be used in any chat. So that's something that you really should be aware of and start using more and more inside of chat and Cowork. And if you think about OpenClaw and where I think Claude Cowork is going to go, is skills are interact with other apps, for example. So your skill could interact with your email or calendar or any app that you integrate with. So it's not just context, but it's also instructions of how to interact with other apps as well. Finally, we have Code. So Code and Cowork are both agentic tools, whereas chat is a little bit more back and forth, as I mentioned, in terms of sending a question and getting an answer. There's some agentic ability like knowing when to search, use web search, things like that. But Claude and Cowork take that to another level. Again, they're able to run for a really long time, have access to your computer. So this is similar. You can select a folder and work inside your computer. Same way as how I talked about with Cowork, where you can give it access to a folder. This is where you would probably give it access to a folder of code, an app folder with all of your code, for example, and then it will have access to that and you'll be able to code from the desktop. Now, if you're familiar with Claude Code, this is basically the exact same thing as from the terminal. You're going to get the same capabilities, but just a little bit of a better UI here. You can select to code locally, or you can use a cloud environment or connect to a virtual machine, something like that, if you're a little bit more technical and aren't coding on your local machine. Another benefit that you're going to get with the Claude Code interface here is that you're going to be able to see the diffs, so like the changes that are made as it's making the code changes. So it's a little more visual, and then you can have a chat and be able to easily have a UI to go back and forth between your different conversations compared to the terminal where it's just the terminal that you're working in. So it's just a nice visual way to use Claude Code. It's a little bit like the Codex app here. I think Codex has done a better job of with their UI and making it easier to chat and code in like this app environment. I think, again, these tools are changing really quickly, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Claude Code tab here is as easy to use as the Codex app is shortly. If you have any questions at all, leave a comment below. If there's anything else you want to learn about Claude Code, Cowork, or chat, let me know, and I'll be sure to cover that in a future video as well. Things are changing really quickly in AI, so subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay updated. We'll see you in the next video.